Apex, the peak of South African motoring.
So Van, you attended the local launch of the Zafira Life, and now we have it on taste. And I've been driving it, but I'm very curious to hear what your thoughts on the car.
So my first interaction with Zafira was my neighbour in Harfield Village. They named their daughter Zafira after the Zafira car that they had. And I kid you not, it's not a lie, it's a true story. And I was always like, sure, imagine having this child that's named after a car. Or maybe the other way around, I don't know. But anyhow, so I've always had like a little smile inside every time I heard the name Zafira. So when the local launch came, and I was like, well, the Zafira Life is here. And I do think that they've breathed like proper, fresh life into... Well, it's the 4th generation, so they've had like 4 attempts at making a really cool people mover, and I think they've nailed it. I think it looks pretty cool. This is the elegance model, top of the range, and what it comes at.
It's 869 900.
870. It's a solid price tag, but again, this car it looks cute, and it's like that typical, like for the oak that kind of loves that combi life. I think. Yeah. This is like the combi life. Like you look at this. Are we allowed to say combi? Did Volkswagen coin that, or what do you call it? Like
I think it's So I don't think
let's be politically correct, and I will call this the Zafira Life.
Yeah, I think.
AKA a really badass van.
But it is the competitor, of course, to the combi.
Yeah, I think it's like probably the closest one from a looks point of view. And if you look at combi, not Caravel, but sure. This nose, I think, is pretty cute, man. Like you just want to put it in your pocket and like load 10 people in the car and then drive.
But that's the thing. How many seats does this one have?
So this one's configuration, I think, is the 7-seater, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, because it's got that center, because it's like the elegance top of the range. It's got that center console with the middle row where it's got pop-up tables, which I find pretty cool if you're into like working in your car. Yeah, I think so. Okay, well let's drive it. It's a lot more fun then.
Yeah, Van, you take the wheel.
This is a pretty cool van. Steering wheel, like it's so unpretentious because I think we sometimes like get blinded by all the bells and whistles that people put on a steering wheel. I do think this is very, very sleek, a very kind of fine design, but I don't want to say basic. Basic is the wrong word, but like just what you need.
Yeah, it's simplistic in its design. I do think because this being the top spec model comes with so many features as standard, like heated front seats, and I mean both seats are electric, and then you have massage functionality. But I think the interior is straightforward. I mean it like the doors, like most of its rivals in top spec guise, the doors open electrically, the rear doors, the sliding doors,
which is cool. I find it a very useful function, especially like if you've got your hands full and you just quickly pull the key. Those things I've always found very smart, and especially if this is your kind of lifestyle, you probably always got like a whole bunch of cargo ready to be loaded, which I do find that very cool. Loads of stowaway compartments,
a lot of them. And I think the other thing, now that you mentioned cargo, I think the thing with the Zafira Life is that, I mean, you can take out the seats, and it does have that netting at the back which you can move. And I think this car, although the top spec model, it does have this dual functionality in a sense that you can use it for moving things. Whereas
and
I think
it's got a nice clearance as well, like from a height point of view.
And you have the 2 sunroofs at the back for the rear passengers. I mean, it's like basically on this side and then on that side, and I mean it looks great. And the only thing is the mesh lining, it's not as thick, so a bit of sunlight does come in.
Can come through.
But it's not that much. My biggest gripe of the interior though is the build quality. I think isn't on par with some of its rivals, and then the infotainment system I think is,
the screen is too small.
yeah, I think I mean it has this, I mean there's a rear view camera, so the camera system is there, and it has this almost sort of 180 degree view system.
Yeah.
Which I think works fine, but the screen isn't as crisp as I would have wanted.
Yeah.
And I mean, apart from it being so small, it feels outdated in a car in this segment. Whereas, I mean, for example, the Kia has this massive screen. It works very well. This screen isn't as user-friendly to use. I mean, there's not a lot of menus necessarily, but I didn't found it as easy to use as in some of the rival cars. But then again, thinking of how much you pay for this car,
yeah, you're like paying for top spec on this.
Yeah.
230,000 less than what you would pay,
Yeah.
for example, with the Kia Carnival.
Yeah, although I do think that if you do have the means, that would be a better buy at the end of the day. But I think for what this is, and I think looking at the pricing, because if you compare it to some of the rivals, like especially with the Combi, for example, this car comes much better equipped as standard.
Yes.
And I mean it doesn't ride bad. The engine is fine, although I think it is a bit low on power and torque. The engine is a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo diesel, and I think it doesn't have sufficient punch, especially if you compare it to some of the rivals. But I mean, for daily driving, the 110 kilowatts and 370 newton meters of torque is fine. But I think when it comes to overtaking trucks, when on the long road,
Yeah,
going
it's
on
sufficient for a
vacation,
daily,
yeah,
but-
going on vacation, it will require some more cautious overtaking. But other than that, driving around in town, I think it's fine. I was impressed with the car when I drove it first, when I first drove it, and because I didn't have a lot of expectations for it.
That's the nice thing. That's how I felt about this
So-
car. Like I went in like complete blank canvas, and
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm gonna take this as a new car, take it for what it's worth, look at pricing, look at spec, and kind of base it on that. Because like you said, like on that people moving side, there's a lot of options on like the really fancy side of things, but you kind of need to compare apples with apples.
Yeah.
And I do think there's small things that they implemented that is cool. Like I said, storage, a lot of it. It's even got like that little storage compartment there.
Yeah, and
then
it's
one of my
lined with
favorites,
velvet, which is great. Yeah, and the
adjustable armrest, which I feel like for a van you can't have one without that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's ones that doesn't have it, or it's just got like a little space here, but not adjustable. And that I dig.
and it has a head-up display, which the thing about it, you can say the car has a head-up display, but it is a very basic head-up display.
And you'll have to sit relatively low.
Yeah, I mean, you
to-
can adjust it, which I have done for my like height and everything. But I mean, overall, I think as a package, and considering the price of it, I think it's definitely worth considering, or definitely worth test driving the car and just experiencing it for oneself. Of course, that said, you have to experience and test drive its rivals as well, and compare their specs and see what works for you if you are in the market for a car like this. It is more family bus-like, if I can put it that, like we mentioned. But I think what counts in its favor is that it does have this dual personality. As okay, we can take the family on a road trip,
and then you can go
but
work.
You can go and work, and then you can carry cargo in it.
Yeah. Which is cool. Then you're not feeling too like I don't want to put like a door in here for your DIY project where you're gonna literally take a door and make it a trestle table. I think we should do a video on that.
So,
quite handy.
I think it has it has a lot of different aspects to its personality as a family bus. But the one thing is, does it do all of them equally well, or does it do all of them well in bits and pieces? But I mean, I've enjoyed the car while having it, although I do think certain improvements can be made. Most notably, I think in terms of the engine output, and then the infotainment system as well.
Yeah, I think my biggest thing would be the infotainment system. As basic as it is, and it is easy to use, it is still, it's small.
Yeah.
But then again, like there's not much space that was left on the dash to put something bigger, or maybe they could have like, I don't know.
Because you have this massive storage compartment right here, which is great. But so I mean that
kind of takes up
that kind
more
of takes
space
up
than what
more space. But I think the car would do well, and I think it would appeal to more people if the infotainment system was upgraded, and then I think in terms of power as well. So that's my biggest gripes with the car. Other than that, the other things almost feel like nitty-gritty, because you have to take everything in consideration for what you pay for the car, and I think for what you pay for it, you do get a lot of car for the price.
So look, I think it's a solid car, but is it a solid contender within the segment? But I do think for the multi-purpose that this delivers, you would feel a lot more comfortable kind of using this as a workhorse, or be kind of a people mover.
And I think the car does get a lot of traction as well, which I was surprised about.
I like the look.
But it did get a lot of traction, and I mean, I won't say it's a bad car at all, because I think because it has so many aspects to it, whether it's the case of jack of all trades, master of none, that remains to be seen. But I think, as I mentioned, considering everything, all the nitty-gritty things, let's like put that to the side, and I mean focus on the infotainment system and the engine output. Those are the two biggest gripes I have. And I mean, as you mentioned as well, you would have liked a bigger screen, and I mean a smoother working infotainment system. But apart from that, I think considering everything for what you pay for the car, you do get a lot of car for your money.
Apex, the peak of South African motoring.